Hello everyone. Today I wanted to continue our discussion of using combinations of proof of stake and proof of work. So we learned that proof of work has many important properties, and one of the important things is that it works in permissionless networks. So permissionless blockchain networks, where you can have any number of participants. So this was the first consensus protocol proposed for these sorts of permissionless blockchains, and they are still in use by blockchains such as Bitcoin and Ethereum and so on. Right, but the problem with this POW protocol is that it's energy hungry. So Bitcoin itself consumes hundreds of megawatts more than, let's say, even some small countries. So people consider that to be a huge waste of energy. So people were thinking of alternatives, and proof of stake was proposed. But then we saw that proof of stake has so many issues which were not there in proof of work. Things like nothing at stake, long range attacks, pre-computing attacks, initial distribution problem, right? And there are several attacks possible with proof of stake. I've listed some of them here. So people thought, can we use a combination of proof of stake and proof of work? And in the previous class, we looked at a combination where every so often you have a proof of work block, but then you have proof of stake blocks, and then you have a proof of work block, and so on. So we looked at this in the previous lecture, and so we said you have n-1 blocks for proof of stake, and then the nth block is from proof of work. So this mitigated these problems somewhat, but not completely. So you could still perform these sorts of attacks while POS was going on, but when proof of work block came, it would sort of break the attack, and you might have to sort of restart an attack over here. Okay, so temporarily you could still have a proof of stake attack, but you couldn't run it for too long, because once in a while you would hit proof of work. So people were wondering, how can we combine these in different ways? And one of the great innovators of the blockchain industry is Vitalik Buterin, and he proposed something called Slasher. So Buterin, I'm not sure if he was even out of his teens when he invented Ethereum, but of course he has a prolific, I would say, inventive capability, and he's had many sort of ideas over the years, right? So in fact, he won a scholarship in his undergraduate study to quit his undergraduate study, right? So Peter Thiel. So Peter Thiel is himself a big innovator, and he started something called PayPal, and his competitor with a different company was Elon Musk. Okay, so Elon Musk and Peter Thiel were having this fight, who would sort of come up with the first sort of version of something like PayPal. But of course later on they joined forces. So Elon Musk and Peter Thiel joined together to actually sort of build up PayPal, right? And so Peter Thiel has invested in many companies. He's a big investor. He was the first investor in Facebook, and of course he's made billions. So he has this fellowship for students with bright ideas, and even if they are in their undergraduate studies, he says, if you have a great idea in your undergraduate. By the time you complete your undergraduate, maybe the idea is no good. It's gone past its time. So implementing the idea at the right moment is very important. So he actually pays undergraduates who have very brilliant ideas to sort of quit their undergraduate studies at least temporarily, and he pays them well enough to take up their idea and whatever, right? And later on, of course, if they want, they can go back and finish their BTechs. So Buterin was one of these people who got a Thiel fellowship, and it paid off because he built Ethereum, which has done quite well. And of course, I'm sure Peter Thiel has invested well, and he's also made a lot of money, right? But Vitalik Buterin had this idea: why can't you have proof of work and proof of stake in the same block? So can you do something like this, that within the same block you have proof of work and proof of stake? And maybe it will have some advantages over the earlier scheme we studied, where you have a proof of work block coming once in a while. So here, since you have proof of work in every block, maybe you can avoid all those attacks like nothing at stake and so on. You can avoid them. And since it has proof of stake, maybe you can do something by which you don't have to use as much energy, because it's being created using stake. You don't actually maybe have to do as much hashing, let's say, to have the same amount of security. Okay, so that's sort of the rough idea. So how would we do something like this? Okay, so how do you set the amount of proof of work, or how much energy is being spent? So this is a question we have to ask. Because after all, the whole idea of doing this proof of work and proof of stake is to save on energy, okay, so that you don't have the regular proof of work running. So how would we do this? So let's think about it. So in Bitcoin, you just have a threshold, and Bitcoin doesn't care about how much energy is spent. All you care about is the time interval between blocks. So if you want it to be 10 minutes, you have to have a particular threshold, right? And if the interval sort of goes much beyond 10 minutes, maybe you want to increase your threshold so that it's easier to generate blocks, right? And if maybe there's too much of hashing power in the network, the interval gets reduced too much. And so what you do is you decrease your threshold so that it's harder for people to generate blocks, and then again the spacing increases, right? So it sort of doesn't care about how much hashing is there in the network. It adapts to whatever is there, okay? So even here, I mean, how do we do it? Suppose we have proof of work plus proof of stake, and I mean, how do we really set how much energy is there? So one of the ideas is that really the amount of hashing depends upon your reward. So you have a proof of work mining reward, and of course if you offer something like 50 Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is a certain amount of money, let's say $10,000, so that's a lot of money, right? 50 times 10,000, right? And so roughly the mining reward sort of upper bounds the amount of money spent on energy. We can roughly say that, right? And let's say that let's say the proof of mining reward is greater than the let's say the money spent on mining energy, right? But of course this may not strictly hold at all points in time, but roughly you would expect this. Okay, so the idea is that let's keep this low. So let's have a lower mining reward, so that effectively the amount of hashing or the amount of energy spent in trying to do hashing comes down. Okay, And what do we mean by low or high? Because it all depends on the price of the currency, right? If Bitcoin is 10,000, then there's a certain amount of hashing. But if it is 1,000, then you would expect the hashing rate to go down by 10 times. Okay, so what do we do here? So roughly in Bitcoin, what happens is every 4 years they halve the mining reward. So half the reward. So Buterin said, since we want low proof of work, I mean we want to use less and less mining energy, we go much further than this 1/2. So why do we have to just half it? He said, let's be more aggressive. Okay, so let's say that the first thing we do is we reduce the mining reward. So Buterin says, let mining reward, POW mining reward, become, let's say, a very small fraction, let's say 0.02 times the POW reward, and this is done every year, let's say. So every year you update the POW reward to be a small fraction of what it was in the previous year. Let's say here it's 1/15 rather than 1/2 in 4 years, 1/15 every year, right? So clearly the POW reward is going down really fast. Okay. So maybe it's going down too fast, you never know, right? Unless a proper analysis is done, a security analysis, we would never know for sure. But this is an idea how you can decrease the mining reward a lot. So initially maybe there's a reasonable amount of reward for POW, but then it decreases pretty fast. But of course this is a number that we could choose, but the idea is that we decrease it faster than Bitcoin. Okay, so obviously the energy consumed is going to get much smaller, faster over time, okay, compared to Bitcoin, okay, where the energy sort of doesn't seem to be going down by that much, because the Bitcoin price also goes up. As you decrease the reward by half, the price might have gone up many times, right? So anyway, this is how we can control the energy used in POW. So now the issue is, how do we use proof of stake? So we are generating blocks using proof of work, and every block has proof of work. So we are almost back to something like Bitcoin, but the mining reward is low here. So when the mining reward is low, that means there's less hashing power, so there's a easier chance for somebody to perform an attack. For somebody to do like a double spend attack from here, he might be able to create another chain on his own without as much difficulty. I mean, it's not straightforward to do this, but it's easier to do it like if you had let's say a decrease in the mining reward which was much slower, or maybe you didn't even decrease the mining reward, you kept it constant, right? So then you would have, in that particular case, you would have a lot of hashing power, so it would be hard to do this sort of an attack. But here you are reducing the mining power, so the hashing rate in the whole network, the number of sort of hashes being done per second, is going to go down over time because of you're decreasing the reward. Okay? So it might be easier for somebody to perform this sort of a double spend attack. Okay? So what Buterin says is let these blocks be generated by proof of work, but for a block to be valid, it also has to be signed by someone or some group of people. So let's say that this corresponds to stake, so it has to be signed. Okay, something in a proof of stake manner, we are going to sort of decide who is going to sign it. And so for a block to be valid, not only does it have to have proof of work, but it also has to have to be signed by some set of, let's say, stakeholders. Okay, and we'll have to find some rule in order to do this. Okay, so let me just write it down. So valid block must have proof of work, plus it must be signed by, let's say, set of persons who own some stake. Okay, so let's say we somehow choose some set of people. Of course, we'll see what Vitalik Buterin suggests at the end. By the way, none of these ideas have actually been implemented in Ethereum. Okay, so there's something called Ethereum 2.0, which is currently being developed. It hasn't yet been put out to the public, though they have their test nets. So Ethereum 2.0 has an advanced version of what we will discuss in this class. Okay, something called Casper, which is an advanced version, let's say, of Slasher, which we are going to discuss today. Right? But till today, Ethereum still uses proof of work. Okay, so let's look at some of the ideas of Buterin, because they're quite interesting. So let's see. So we said that we have to have a block which has proof of work and also has to be signed. Okay, and so why would it be hard for somebody to do a double spend in this sort of a situation? Let's think about it. So suppose he has to have a successful double spend attack. He would need to generate blocks using POW. That's non-trivial to do. Okay. And at the same time, he would have to have these blocks signed. So how is the attacker going to do this? So suppose he's generating this chain in private. And suppose he only has hashing power. Right? He's a traditional Bitcoin sort of double spend attacker. He has a lot of hashing power, so he generates a chain like this one. But suppose he doesn't have stake. He's not going to be able to sign these blocks, right here, because we said that we are going to come up with a scheme where somebody who has stake in the blockchain, okay, so let's say the stake here in the blockchain is going to decide, let's say, who's going to sign this one. Okay. So if he doesn't have stake, he's not going to be able to pull off this attack on his own. He might be able to generate a long chain, but even when he releases it, people will see, okay, that it has proof of work, all right, but it hasn't been signed by the appropriate people. So for somebody to be able to do this attack, he should have proof of work, but he should also own a lot of stake. Otherwise, he'll not be able to produce this. Okay, so it makes it a little bit easier and harder in different senses. It's easier because you need less POW to generate this chain. okay, because we've decreased the mining reward and the hashing, total hashing in the network. But at the same time, you will have to own a lot of stake if you want to be able to sign these blocks. Okay, so there is some trade-off over here. But what we are succeeding to do is we are succeeding in reducing energy, and at the same time we are making certain attacks difficult. Let's look at nothing at stake, how easy it would be to do a nothing at stake attack. So here we have a proof of work block getting generated. So let's say that there happens to be a fork. And earlier when we had pure proof of stake, we said there's a nothing at stake problem where somebody can actually extend both chains and it doesn't cost him anything because it's just based on proof of stake. So here we are saying that there's proof of work, but there's also proof of stake. So these blocks are getting signed. So we haven't yet decided how we're going to choose people who are going to sign it. We'll look at that in a moment. So now the question is, what are miners going to do? So first of all, they have to generate proof of work blocks, right? So you can't mine on both. You have to make your choice. So you cannot do POW on both. Of course, you could sort of actually try to generate blocks on each, but then you would have to divide your hashing power. You cannot sort of do the same amount of hashing power. I mean, you can't dedicate your entire hashing power on both. You would have to choose, sort of split up your hashing power between one or the other chain, right? So you can't extend both of these. You have to make a choice, and that is what is going to break your nothing at stake problem. Okay? But let's say that suppose we even reach this stage where somebody has generated proof of work, and let's say that genuinely there was a fork over here. Can we actually decrease the chances of this fork by taking care of the proof of stake part of it? So can we ensure only one is signed? So this was the idea that Buterin was thinking of. So in general, in proof of work, you could have forks, and then the fork is lingering and nobody knows which part of the fork is going to win. So that takes care, of course, of the nothing at stake problem, but you can still have forks. So his idea was, can we get rid of forks completely? So can we do this signing in such a way that you can't have two blocks signed at the same level in the tree? Is that even possible? Okay, and so this is where some of his ideas come in. So he says, let's actually do this. So what we're going to do is, let's say that we choose somebody. Let's say that you choose one person. So this is not his full idea, but let's say that we choose, let's say, one person based on the stake. To sign. So let's say this is BK minus 1, BK minus 2, and so on. So let's say we choose based on the stake up to here. We sort of so up to this point, we look at the stake and we choose one person, let's say, to sign the next block. So how can you prevent this one person from signing both the blocks? Okay, so what if that person says that I don't know which one is going to win, and so then I'm going to sort of sign both. Okay, there's a slight issue over there, right? So because then if he signs both, then I mean the fork continues. But can you break the fork right there using this signing method? Okay. So here's an idea that the rule. Let's say that we create a rule where the person is allowed to sign only a single block at a particular depth in this POW tree which is getting created. And how can we prevent him? What if he signs more than one block? Then we punish him. Okay, so we punish this person if he signs multiple blocks. Let's say at same level in the tree. So how are we going to punish somebody? So this it's getting interesting here. So till now, when we had proof of work, there was no punishing somebody, right? But what can we do over here? So really, how can we punish him? I mean, we can't send the police after him, right? Because the police has nothing to do with the blockchain. They don't know anything happening about the rules there, right? It's not part of the legal system. So how do we punish somebody? Well, all that we have control over is his stake. So this person, let's say some person A, whom we've chosen, has a certain amount of stake in the blockchain up to here. Let's say we confiscate some of his stake. Okay, and really that's all that we can do here. So we can punish this person by confiscating his stake. So we need some mechanism in order to be able to do this, right? So right now there was, at least in Bitcoin, there is no way to just confiscate somebody's money, right? Once it's his, he has the private key, that's it, it's safe. So now we want to change things a little bit so that his money can be taken away if he misbehaves. Okay, but it's a powerful idea. So the idea is if that this person A, let's say we have chosen some person A, let's say that we have chosen A. So if A tries to sign both, then his money is going to be confiscated by, let's say, the people of the blockchain. Okay. So how we are going to do that is a little bit tricky. So what we are going to do is that anybody who wants to be able to sign a block will have to deposit some money. You have to keep it frozen. And within that particular time, if anybody else gives a sort of proof that this person has misbehaved, then his money can be confiscated. Part of the money can be given to the person who has revealed that he has tried to cheat. And part of the money, let's say, can be something else can be done to it. It could be destroyed or it could be given to other miners and so. Right? So this is what we are going to do. So let's say how to punish. And let's say that all those participating in proof of stake, let's say POS signing, deposit some money for some duration okay. So let's say that this is the timeline, and let's say that A deposits money at this point in time, and what we are going to do is we are going to keep his money for some duration. So let's say that the deposit is kept, let's say, locked in the blockchain, and at some later point in time it's going to be released. So during this time the money is locked up. A cannot spend it. It's sort of frozen using some particular contract, let's say, and later on it is released. Okay, so you can't keep his money forever because that's unfair. That means he's losing the money. So after it is released, A can spend the money. Now the question is, how long do we keep this money? Okay, so what we really want to do is that if A tries to cheat during this time his money is locked, he can be punished and his money can be confiscated in some way. Okay, so let's say that this is the blockchain and A's money has been deposited, let's say, in some particular block over here, and let's say over here A is supposed to sign this block, but suppose he tries to cheat and suppose he tries to sign 2 blocks. Now we want to punish him. Okay, so if somebody sees that he has actually signed 2 blocks at the same level, they can give proof that he has done this. Okay, so you can actually show that he has signed these 2 blocks which point to the same one, for example, at this level, and that can be done by let's say a punishment transaction. So the punishment transaction, let's say, is released over here. And that transaction can be included in both of these. Okay, it doesn't matter. Okay. And what is going to happen with this transaction is that his deposit is confiscated. So let's say whenever this transaction gets in, let's say that this transaction gets into a block over here, and it might also get into another block even in this chain. Okay, doesn't matter which one wins. The punishment transaction might get in here too. And immediately at this point, as soon as that transaction is executed, the deposit of A, which was put over here in this block, let's say, that is confiscated. So we have to think what it means to confiscate somebody's money. Right? What are you going to do with it? So definitely you don't want to give it back to A. So you could transfer it, let's say, to the miner who is generating a particular block. That's one way of doing it. right? Whoever generates this transaction, or maybe the person who generated the transaction gets a part of it, right? So you want to divide the spoils, whatever he has deposited, among some set of people. Yeah, and there is a possibility that A is himself one of the participants, maybe the person who generated this transaction or generated this block and so on. So what you might want to do is, instead of just distributing this deposit among certain people, you may actually also want to burn that money. Okay, so we'll talk about that in a moment. So suppose, okay, so this continues, and let's say that this chain actually ends up winning. Okay, and so his money is confiscated, and then we don't have to, the money of course is not going to be released in case it has been confiscated. But in case nobody has proven that A has misbehaved, then of course the money is released. Okay, so let's actually write that down. So the steps: A deposits money, okay, which is locked. Let's say that this is in some block, right? In let's say block BK, and it is locked till some B K plus N. Okay, and after BK plus N, A can spend this money again. And let's say A signs some block, let's say B K plus M, and M is of course less than N, and if A signs multiple blocks, at the particular level in the blockchain tree, at let's say K plus M, then anyone can send a punishment transaction. Which confiscates his money. Confiscates his deposit. Okay. And if the money is confiscated, he cannot of course spend it. Let's say after BK plus N, right? He cannot spend it ever again, right? That's what we want. Okay. So how do we exactly confiscate? So we have to think of a permissionless setting. So we have to give incentives for people to do things. So we said that there is this block, and A has signed two blocks at the same level, which he is not supposed to do, right, according to rules. Okay. We want to have this mechanism so that we avoid forks completely, right? But so suppose he has signed two blocks, then somebody has to sort of create this transaction, right? punishment transaction. So how do we give this person an incentive? So suppose A has deposited some money. Let's say that he has deposited, let's say X Bitcoin or whatever, X units of currency. So if we don't offer any incentive to people to create this punishment transaction, they may not create it at all, right? Why bother? So what we have to do is we want to give some part of it to the person creating this. So within this punishment transaction itself, he gives proof of this fork, which on these two blocks which have been signed by A, and he can take this some part of this deposit for himself. Let's say we allow that. Now we want somebody to actually include this transaction in the blockchain. So these are the blocks, right? So we want somebody to include this transaction here. So we'll have to offer some incentive to the miner also, okay, just so that they are incentivized to including this. So part of this, let's say we give to the miner. So we are dividing the spoils, okay, and at least so that these people act, right? So that whoever is creating a block will say, okay, if I include this transaction, I will get, let's say, a big chunk of this deposit. Okay, so that's why I want to include it. Now there's a slight tricky issue that we really don't know who is A in the real world and who is generating this transaction and who's creating the block. Right? It's possible that they are the same person, and so if we just give A his own money back, he's not, that's not a punishment of any kind, right? So of course it may be a rare thing that he both generates a block and he generates this transaction. But it's possible that he generates a transaction. It doesn't take much effort. He could himself sort of send it out, for whatever reason. Okay. So the question is, but if he is the person who's generating this transaction and he's the one who's creating this block, then that's not a punishment. So a third thing that you might want to do is to actually burn the rest. So what does it mean to burn some money? Okay, so let's think of it in terms of Bitcoin. So we said that this is just an example, and you might do it differently in different blockchain systems. So let's say that this is the deposit transaction. So there's some UTXO here. This is the output. Currently it's unspent. So what you could do in the punishment transaction is the following. Let's say that this is created by B and this is created by C. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to take this as input, and of course there's going to be some proof of misbehavior. Okay, so that much is there, but you're going to take this and you're going to give some outputs. Okay, so first output is going to be some amount to B. Let's say this is the public key of B. Okay, some alpha times x where alpha is between 0 and 1 according to the rules of the blockchain. Okay. Secondly, you want to burn some of this money. So let's say that some of it, the remaining 1 minus alpha, and let's say we multiply it by some beta, and this is actually given to it's paid to the 0 key. Okay, so beta is also between 0 and 1. So 0 is a number nobody has the private key for. So 0 is public key. No one has the private key. Okay, so usually what you do is that you can actually choose any integer or something like that, something that people know that you don't have the private key. So I mean it would take you pretty much infinite amount of time to find a private key which matches this public key. Okay, so let's assume for the moment nobody has a private key for this. So you have paid it to 0, so nobody is going to be able to spend it, okay, because nobody knows the private key for it. Okay. And of course the remaining amount is which the miner can take is the remaining amount. So let's say that is given as a transaction fee. Okay, so I'll just write that alpha times beta times x is the transaction fee. I think that's not right. Alpha, it would be 1 minus alpha times 1 minus beta times x is the transaction fee, right, which is remaining. Okay, so this is a standard technique of burning money. You pay it to a public key for which you know that the private key is never going to be ever found. Okay? And that's sort of ensuring that the money is burned. Okay, so it's a good way of sort of punishing somebody. So even if A happens to be B and C, he still loses some amount of money. Okay? And of course, if he's not B and C, then he loses all his money. Okay? So this is a way of punishing somebody who misbehaves. So to recap what we have looked at till now, we haven't really given all the details of Buterin's slasher idea, but what he's saying is that we want to generate all blocks with some proof of work, but which doesn't use too much energy. We want to choose some one person, let's say, to sign a particular block at a particular level. So let's say that and we said that that person has to deposit money sometime earlier on. A is deposit, and let's say A is the designated signer at this level. So if there happens to be a fork here, he should only sign one of them so that the fork doesn't continue, it's immediately killed. But if he tries to sign multiple blocks, then somebody can release a punishment transaction and he will lose his deposit. Right? Otherwise the deposit is returned somewhere here. So the deposit is released if there is no misbehavior. Okay, so this is what we've looked at till now. So the thing is, how do we choose this A? That's what we haven't decided. And there are some issues to consider. What if something happens to A? So we've designated A to sign this particular block at this particular level. But what if A loses internet connectivity, right? Or what if A's machine collapses, right? Or what if A is malicious and he doesn't sign any block? Then what happens? Okay, so this is an issue. So what if A does not sign any block at this particular level? So we said we call this Bk and this is Bk plus M. Maybe I should just say at level K plus M. This is a serious issue. So before we go to that, why would you want to assign somebody? Why don't we just use a proof of stake method? We had a proof of stake method. Why do we have to decide in advance who's going to sign it? So just think for a moment. So suppose you just use some proof of stake method, the usual method we saw, where you change the timestamp and a random person is chosen to sign the block here. Okay. So if we do that, then the problem is that you may have a different person chosen to sign these two different blocks. Okay, and then you could as well perfectly have, without anybody breaking any rules, you could have both of these validly signed. Okay, so we want to avoid using the normal proof of stake method, which just chooses sort of randomly somebody to sign. Right? So after this block, what normal proof of stake does is that after this block, we run the proof of stake algorithm and somebody realizes that he has to sort of create the next block, right? And in this case, sign the block. But we don't want to do that because we want the same person to sign so that we can punish him. Okay, we don't want to have just a random person signing on any particular chain. Okay, so the question is, what if this A does not sign any block? And that's a big problem, because then we said that a block has to be signed for it to be valid. Okay, so we are going to do two things here. So one idea is that you don't just choose a single person, you choose a set of people to sign a block at a particular level. So for block Bk plus M, we choose a set of signers. Let's say we choose 15 of them. Okay, just a number large enough. Okay, so even if some of them go offline, or if some of them fail, or some of them are malicious, that's not too bad. Even if some of them don't sign, at least the rest of them are there. Okay, so we essentially assume that a large number of these are honest. Okay, and so even if one or two of them drop out, then that's not a big deal. Okay, still you have enough other signers, okay, who will sign the block. But again, we have to worry, what if these are malicious? What if they try to sign multiple blocks? Okay, then of course they can still be punished using punishment transactions later on, right? But if let's say a large number of them are honest, then can we avoid having a prolonged fork? Okay, so suppose let's look at this situation. So let's say that you have a committee to sign, Okay, so let's say that all the committee members have deposited their money before BK, and now we've reached BK plus N, and there happens to be a fork here in the proof of work. So what are we going to do? It's possible that some subset of miners sign this block and another subset sign this block, right? Even if they sign only once, okay, it gets split. So we would have to choose one of them. So let's say that valid block must have 2/3 of the committee who signs it. And if large number of them are honest, then this will only happen to one block. You won't have two blocks signed by 2/3. Okay, so you can prove that if 2/3 of the miners are honest and only 1/3 are malicious, you can never have both blocks signed by 2/3 of the committee. Okay, so this is a property we'll study later on. When we talk about Byzantine fault tolerance, this is a topic we'll cover later in the course. And we can show that if 2/3 are honest, let's say greater than 2/3 of the committee is honest, then we cannot have two blocks signed by 2/3 of the committee. Okay, or by, I should say, at least 2/3 of the committee. Then we cannot have two valid blocks. At the same level. Okay, so this is a standard property which is used by security researchers. Okay, that you have a committee and you assume that more than 2/3 is honest, and then you can always use these signature schemes and you say that something is valid if it is signed by at least 2/3, because you can never have two groups of more than 2/3 which disagree with each other if you have this many honest people. So we'll study this in some detail when we talk about Byzantine fault tolerance. Okay, so this is an idea, but of course, what if you don't have greater than 2/3 who are honest, right? What if the entire committee is malicious? Then you might actually have a situation where they all sign both the blocks, and then you would have to punish them in some way. And that you can do with a punishment transaction later. Okay, so these are the basic ideas. So we generate all blocks with proof of work, but in addition we say that they have to be signed, and how we choose these we are yet to discuss, but we don't choose a single person to sign a block at a particular level. We choose a committee to sign at a particular level, and once, of course, the committee has signed a block, at least 2/3 of the member of the committee has signed a block, it is considered valid. And in case you have two blocks which are signed validly, then you have to punish the people who have signed both of them. Right? Okay. So there are still other things that we have to think about. What if you have two sort of valid blocks at both levels? I mean, how are we going to resolve these forks, right? Or what if you have a situation where nobody signs a block at a particular level? What do we do, right? Then there are other issues like pre-computing attack, which we looked at earlier, where people were in proof of stake, they were trying to create a particular block and they were trying to generate it in such a way so that they got a chance to sign the next block at the next level and so on. Right? So all of these issues Vitalik Buterin addresses to some extent in Slasher. Okay, and we'll talk about the exact details of Slasher next.